Hi, everybody. It feels very strange to be speaking in front of a live audience. This is the first time for me in about 18 months, so I think I'll just hug the podium. But it is wonderful to be here, and it's wonderful to have this, the theme of this conference be in a city that I love and on a topic that I love, which is cities and metropolis. And I am speaking about private money and public good, and I'll get to that. But I first wanted to start with a kind of a more provocative question for me that's really already been asked. I think Lutz raised this. The great fear that I have and all people who love cities have is our livable cities on the decline? Can cities be livable anymore? And it's a moment where, with the convergence of climate issues and the pandemic, that I think a lot of us have been thinking about this and worried, and especially those of us who haven't wanted to decamp to the country. So yes, that's been a big question for me, and I want to take a positive approach to this and think I've got a great example of a positive approach to solving these problems. But I have worked for the past 20 years in philanthropy. So philanthropy is essentially private wealth. It's been created by an economic system that has also produced a lot of the problems the challenges that cities have. And so it's perhaps with a bit of irony that you find philanthropy working so hard to solve some of these problems. But that's the lens I've been working in with the past 20 years. And for many years in health, so working on infectious diseases and helping to invest in platforms and products for both endemic infectious diseases, epidemic, and future pandemics. So, the community I've been working with over the past 20 years has been thinking and anticipating this moment for quite a long time. And then in the last 5 years, working on climate issues and doing the same thing, investing in organizations who are working to both mitigate and help communities adapt to the effects of climate. But it's really astounding, though, to have worked on this last 20 years on both these themes, and then to see them converge in such a dramatic way. So when it comes to cities, though, and living in cities as I always have, and currently living in Amsterdam, and originally from San Francisco, which is, I think, one of these cities where we really have to question whether San Francisco is a livable place. It feels like the prognosis isn't good for cities. Why do we live in cities? We live in cities because we want to be in close proximity to people, and we want to experience communal living, and we want to experience what other people are producing. But what has this kind of dual crisis meant for us? Well, first of all, people are infectious. People are vectors for disease, and that's just a complete contradiction to the way we live in cities and the reason we choose to live in cities. And then buildings and transport are among the biggest drivers of emissions. And so, when you think of buildings and intensification of buildings and transport, you think of cities. So not only are cities the ones suffering the most at this time, but they're also being perceived as part of the problem, the driver of the problem. So we need to redraw the landscapes of cities, and yes, it's right to dwell on the damage and all that we have lost in cities as a consequence of this moment, but also, the effects on lives and livelihoods and the changes we're going to need to make that are not so comfortable. But I'm one of those people, and I think probably all of us here are, that thrives in cities. And as we reopen in Amsterdam, I'm reconfirm the reason that I choose to live in cities. And I've lived in some of the best of them. So I speak from real personal experience here in London and Buenos Aires and Beirut, New York, LA, San Francisco, and Berlin. I've even spent a short time in my 20s in Berlin. So I speak for someone who truly believes that this is possible. So if you want to focus on the positive, where do you start? And again, looking at it from the point of view of philanthropy, and how does philanthropy help to solve these big challenges? While it's such a small amount of money relative to what the commercial sector has available, or relative to what public financing is available. But philanthropy can actually be a really important lever for some of these issues. And I'll give you an example of that. But the question for me is, where is the opportunity for philanthropy and civil society to intervene in these big challenges when they're such deep systemic problems. And what does it take to make cities more livable, more breathable, more resilient, greener, more desirable to live in for all of us, but notably for families, since many of them are the ones who have abandoned cities. So the case study I'll use is, as was mentioned, I'm on the board and have funded the Clean Air Fund. And it's a really good example of a problem that philanthropy has come together around to find those leverage points to drive really big change. And of course, with clean air and with air pollution, it's largely an urban problem. And it largely needs local solutions. There can be technologies that are available. There can be, big global research projects. There can be big global organizations. But fundamentally, it is a local problem, and it's a mayor's problem. And particularly as it links to the climate problem, there's a lot more leadership from mayors and cities going on often than there is at the national level or global level. So 9/10 of us are affected by poor quality air, like I said, mostly urban. But according to the WHO, 55 million people, or 55 million deaths, all-cause deaths, occur every year. And can anyone imagine how much of that is due to bad air? Don't know if anyone's going to have the courage to guess, but it's 7 million. So 15% of all-cause global deaths are caused by poor air quality. And all of us who live in cities know this. But to make it very personal, I don't know if any of you, particularly any of you who've lived in London or live in London, know the story of Ella Kesey Deborah, which is something in the clean air movement that we reflect on, because she was she was 9 years old in 2013 when she died. And air pollution is particularly terrible for children because of their early childhood development, and also because they stand about this level, and that's the level at which car exhaust occurs. So children are really, really vulnerable. But with the case of Ella, she was asthmatic. She lived in southeast London. In the last 3 years of her life, she was 28 times in the hospital. And when researchers have gone back, 27 of those 28 times were peak poor air quality events. But the doctors at the hospital never questioned the fact that she was living 25 meters from the South Circular Road. She went to school in proximity to that same road, just kept treating her. And her mother, when she died, Rosamund, has led a campaign that only recently has resulted in an inquest in December 2020, where her cause of death was restated on her death certificate as being clean air pollution. So, in effect, she's the first person in the world to have been declared officially as having died of air pollution. So, the Clean Air Fund was put together by a couple of us philanthropies, IKEA Foundation and the Children's Investment Fund Foundation. And we put together about 50 million of funding, so largely the two foundations plus a couple of other funders. And basically the objective is to fund local communities, cities. We focus on a few geographies, of course, because the problem is big, but the money is small, to help motivate them to take the actions, the policy actions, the regulatory actions, work with civil society and the organization that are pushing for the change, and also the research that's required. So we have a couple of examples of great things that have been done, but it is an issue. It is an issue for citizens, and it's an issue for mayors, because the mayors are the ones who are elected by these citizens. And among the research we've done is that 90% of people in Nigeria and India feel like air pollution is one of the biggest problems they want politicians to solve. And 2/3, in a survey we did in Bulgaria, Britain, India, Nigeria, and Poland, said that citizens want stricter measures, want their mayors, want their community leaders to make difficult changes. It's an election issue. It has been in Poland and in London. And oftentimes it's communities reacting to a lack of national leadership So they are counting on mayors to make the difficult changes and design cities in a different way through either policy and regulation, the way transportation, public transportation works and is electrified, how buildings are built. Among the reasons that we as philanthropists felt like clean air was an important wedge on the climate issue is because we can see how difficult it's been to get the public to understand the impact of climate. I think we see it now, but it's unfortunate that it's really taken this long. It's taking devastating, events, video on TV for people to realize it's here. Yes, scientists have been talking for decades and decades, but it's only when you see this devastation close to home that people believe it. Well, clean air is something that's much closer to home, much closer to families, much easier as an issue for voters, much easier, or has been easier to mobilize people than it has on climate issues. I think that's really changing. But for climate and clean air, 2/3 of the air pollution problem is due to burning fossil fuels. So it is the same problem. As the solutions we have for climate are the solutions for clean air. Also, we've seen that a lot of the devastation we have seen with COVID and the deaths we've seen and the illness. Obviously, people who live in polluted areas have more respiratory issues, and there's data to suggest they're more vulnerable to COVID. So all of these issues truly are converging. A couple of the things we've done with the Clean Air Fund is we funded some work called Breathe London, and London really is a leader in Europe in terms of, and the UK generally, in terms of cities working on the clean air issue. With Breathe London, we funded the installation of air monitors in 33 boroughs, not just to help the mayor and council members and policymakers figure out how to manage the problem and where there was a problem, but also to mobilize the community as well and make it a voters' issue. And then also, many of you are probably familiar with the C40 network. That's the network of mayors. Berlin is, of course, a member. Many of the mayors and cities that are participating here are members of the C40 network, which is a network of mayors who are taking action on climate. And it's a forum for collaboration. It's much like this conference aims to be. It's by talking and sharing about the solutions that you can actually see progress across multiple cities. So there's a clean air initiative or clean air network within the cities, the C40 cities, that includes Berlin as well. So those are among the things that we funded at the Clean Air Fund. And often I think one thing that we see as a tension between, people and planet, people and the environment, people and climate, is that there cannot be coexistence. That's an overwhelming narrative, and it makes for a very pessimistic narrative as well. Naturally, you can just toss up your hands and say there is no solution if you think that, either people win or the planet wins. However, on the issue of clean air, and this is some of the research we funded as well, the links between clean air and the positive economic benefits, the data are there, and it should, by doing this research, we're hoping to make it easier for mayors and for citizens to do something that works in favor of both people and planet. So, for example, there was a study we funded with the Confederation of British Industries about called Breathing Life into the UK Economy, which demonstrated that achieving WHO air quality levels would increase the economy by 1.6 billion pounds. Dahlberg has done work in India with the same conclusions. There was a study in 2018 around the link between business and spending and poor air quality, where in Spain it was shown that on days when the air quality was 10% worse, that spending dropped by about 23 to 35 million euros a day. And that by increasing air quality a certain percentage, you would increase spending by 19 to 30 billion annually. There is also another, I don't know if there's going to be any discussion of the issue of land use in cities and parking, but I think a lot of us understand that parking is not a very good use of space, particularly in urban environments. But again, there's this tension between, where it's better not to have cars, but, the the commercial district wants shoppers to come in. Well, there's a study in 2012 which talked about how shops continually overestimate their reliance on customers who drive. That a customer who drives to a store spends more in that one occasion, but walkers and cyclists go many more often to stores, and on average in this study, and this was done for UK councils, that walkers spend £147 more per month than do drivers. So there's, this is part of using philanthropy in order to produce data and to mobilize both politicians and mayors, but also civil society, and to hold politicians to account. So I guess, in conclusion, I mean, I don't want to suggest that using philanthropic money is going to have any near the effect that those of you with access to public financing or those of you working in the private sector can achieve. But certainly in terms of being dynamic and flexible and operating perhaps a little more below the radar, philanthropic money can actually operate in key leverage points. So I guess my message to Mayor Müller, or to any of the other mayors participating or watching, is that when it comes to an issue like clean air or much bigger issues being discussed, that go far, because that's what your citizens want you to, and then go further. And only this will allow the kind of radical transformation of our economic system, because going slower and going less boldly won't get us where we need to go. So thank you very much. And yeah, I'll hand the mic back over.